My name is Dr. Asim Malhotra. I'm a consultant cardiologist. I've been a practicing doctor for well over 20 years. I've done a lot of work on health policy. I'm also an international best-selling author. And more recently, I've done a critical review of the COVID mRNA vaccines. I was actually invited to come and speak in South Africa in a number of different cities. And my initial connection actually was through a South African elder, a very well-known gentleman called Jay Naidoo, who felt that there was a big issue and concerns regarding the COVID vaccines and wanted me to come and speak to policymakers, doctors, and members of the public on this major public health issue.
I sent him a message to say, hey, I really believe that what you are saying brings greater clarity to all of us about what's happening in this pandemic response. I felt that, this was such an important source of information, an encyclopedia on the type of medicine, honest medicine we want to see. And I just found him so open, so frank about the fact that he had supported the vaccines at the beginning until he did a peer-reviewed study on vaccine injuries. He's a person that has been recognized across the world. He's a cardiologist, and he's one of the top 100 recognized people in medicine and science who suffered personal injury, who suffered injuries in his family, who sees it across his medical field. I will stand by him. And I think he represents a point of view that I want to listen to. And I think the majority of people in the world want to listen to.
Asim Malhotra has been one of the most courageous people on earth to actually come forward and actually travel around the world. And he's opening up a big can with lots of worms in it.
I think what's also been helpful for people to be open-minded on this issue is because I myself took 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine in early 2021, at the time, under the belief, which has been proven false, certainly, that it would protect my patients. I then went on Good Morning Britain to talk about vaccine hesitancy, specifically because at that time in the UK, we were only offering it to people at high risk. The evidence changed very quickly. Certainly, we knew by the summer of 2021 that it wasn't stopping transmission, and therefore, it certainly had to become an individual choice based upon benefits and perceived harms. And then I suffered a loss of an immediate family relative. My father suffered a sudden cardiac arrest in the summer of 2021. His post-mortem findings didn't make sense. He had very severe narrowing of his coronary arteries. And it was several months later that I made the link that it was likely the vaccine that killed my dad. And it was that stage I decided I was going to critically review the evidence. I also had campaigned quite strongly towards the end of 2021 to overturn the vaccine mandate for healthcare workers. And I was able to get that message across on all mainstream media channels, the BBC, Sky News, on LBC Radio, to call for that. And I even got information through to the chair of the BMA, who spoke to the Secretary for Health, and we were successful in that campaign. But at that stage, I decided to look at a full critical review of the evidence, and unfortunately concluded that the vaccine probably should never have been rolled out in the first place.
I've watched Asim kind of come to the party. I know people have criticized him for saying he's come to the party a little late, but I really admire him being so honest and open about being willing to change his perspective when he was presented with new evidence, which is what I think we should all be willing to do. We should be willing to approach new information with an open mind and be willing to hear it and evaluate it ourselves instead of dismissing something that we're told is wrong by authority figures.
Dr. Malhotra's visit to South Africa was a pivotal event, in my opinion. I acted as the coordinator of the trip and accompanying him in the Drakensberg for the BizNews conference, where he delivered an excellent presentation, and we did a panel discussion on the one afternoon. And I think we got some really terrific content out there. It seems that he definitely struck a nerve and drew a lot of attention.
At the BizNews conference, I gave a keynote lecture, and then was interviewed by the editor of BizNews, the chief editor-in-chief of BizNews, which is Alec Hogg, and had a full discussion and debate regarding the vaccines. And the response from the audience was extraordinary, and also sad. One gentleman approached me who was there with his wife, and he thanked me for the talk, but Only during the talk, when his wife burst into tears, did they realize or make the link between the fact that they lost their 47-year-old son to a sudden cardiac death only a few months earlier, and realized because of the data I was presenting that it was most likely because of the vaccine. And then in the conference as well, somebody who attended my talk is a well-known politician called Helen Ziller. I also had a conversation with her, and she seemed very open to accepting that there'd been a change in the information and change in the data, and there should probably be an investigation into the side effects issue.
Our government must really wake up. In fact, South Africans particularly, we have a large proportion of our population who actually don't know anything about this. They just have to believe what's been told to them. I reckon it's one of the biggest human exploitations that has ever happened. And for these companies to have taken a vast amount of money from our government, well, we have other needs, and we are an unhealthy country anyway. We don't need this sort of stuff.
One of my most recent talks actually was at the Provincial Parliament in Cape Town, and that was hosted by Deputy Speaker of the Democratic Alliance Party, Beverly Schaefer. There was a good 30 to 40 people who attended, including cross-party members of Parliament. And that talk was extremely well received. Actually, I was pleasantly surprised. I understand many of those people weren't fully aware of what was going on.
It was a multi-party invitation just to open up our minds to differences and points of view. The fact is, he's a specialist. He's a cardiologist. He has a history of peer-reviewed articles that he's been writing for many years. He knows what he's talking about. And I thought it was time that we started the conversation. Because up to now, since lockdown, we really have been very mum at looking at any science, any outcome. We don't even talk about it. It's a question of we're not going there. It's done. And I felt that it really needed to be an open discussion. I think people were excited firstly to attend the talk. So I had people come from the National Assembly. We had the ANC there, we had the EFF there, we had the ACDP there, we had the DA there, and we had staff from the administration. The presentation was excellent. It was all evidence-based. I had very positive feedback to say it was very refreshing. I may not agree with everything, but it was really nice to hear someone different and to be able to engage.
I think the evidence on the vaccine and the structural failures that led to its rollout and its coercion and even mandates is very clear. So when people sit down and hear the evidence, then their minds are usually much more open to understanding that there's a big problem. And that has been consistent for me wherever I've spoken all around the world in the last several months, including even in the British Parliament. So once people actually sit down and are open to listening, then the evidence becomes very clear that we have got a major problem with this vaccine.
I organised a private meeting with John Steenhuisen, with Dr. Malhotra. He asked him questions about some of the issues that were raised. So for example, why are we seeing young men in particular coming up with myocarditis? Why are we seeing sports stars that are collapsing on the field? And I think they were very important questions to ask. I mean, John sits at the head of a oppositional party that most likely will take some office at a national level next year in our elections. John has to be informed of all sides of the coin. It really was about policy implications, where Dr. Malhotra felt the problem was at a political level and what to do about it going forward. I'd given my entire cabinet at the time, I think it was a year ago, each a book on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Fauci. And John had mentioned to Dr. Malhotra that he had read the book.
It was a real honor and pleasure to go and meet the leader of the DA, John Steenhuisen. It seemed like a very open, pleasant gentleman. And I did explain everything to him. And he was very open-minded to hearing my side and other side of the story. And I think he's absolutely right. You know, you can only get to the truth when you hear all different perspectives. So he's asked me to send him my research papers for him to read. And I think that's a very positive step.